What's up, guys? Welcome to Mets Off Day Live. I'm your host, Niki Lattarulo, and today I am joined by SNY manager of editorial production, Danny Abriano, and SNY contributor and host of the New York podcast, John Jastremski. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Looks like July is already off to a better start for the Mets than June was. They stopped their bleeding of the 3-13 stretch, taking 2 of 3 from both the Brewers and the Yankees. They did it with just a conglomeration of pitching. In that 6-game stretch, they had 3 bullpen games. JJ, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts on the Mets pitching in that 6-game span?
Listen, all things considered, gang, it held up pretty well. I mean, you went into the Subway Series, and Friday was the cast of thousands pitching for the Mets. Saturday, you knew you had Montas, and then Sunday, you know you're going with an opener, and Max Fried's on the mound for the Yankees. If you would have told any Met fan going into 4th of July, hey, you'd find a way to take 2 or 3 from the Yankees, and you'd be making the Yankees sweat on Sunday with Max Fried on the mound, you gladly would have signed up for it. You gladly would have taken it. And all in all, I think there are a lot of positives here. The offense showed up. The bullpen was able to get back to where it was earlier in the year. I thought you had some really encouraging outings from guys like Brazoban, Garrett, of course, with the 6-out save on Friday. I'd be feeling much better if I'm a Met fan than where I was after they lost that first game against the Brewers.
Definitely good signs of life for the Mets in the series against the Yankees. Danny, in that span, who impressed you the most? Which pitcher?
Everybody who pitched on Friday. I mean, that was just a pretty crazy way to win a game. They went into the series knowing they're doing 2 bullpen games out of 3 with Montas sandwiched in between. So Friday was kind of a must-get for them, not knowing how the rest of the weekend was going to go. And really, everyone stepped up. And like JJ said, like Garrett pitched a phenomenal outing during this series. You had Diaz locking it down on Saturday and Sunday. But everybody who pitched on Friday, that was the game. And that was also the game where I felt like they got their mojo back a little bit. Jeff McNeil really exalted, went nuts after his home run. Friday was a huge day for them because it kind of took all the pressure off. The first bullpen game out of the way, and that was just a huge win for them.
We know this isn't sustainable long-term to have just a bunch of pitchers trying to come together and just get a win some way, somehow. But JJ, does this give a little bit of hope for Mets fans? Does this prove anything about this team that they can win games this way when their best pitchers rather, aren't even out there?
Yeah, listen, you have to show resilience over the course of a long season. And everything was going hunky-dory for the Mets over the first 2 months. They have hit some hard times in the month of June because of guys getting hurt. And you had some regression to the mean, which I think was inevitable from this pitching staff. Now, don't get me wrong, Niki. If they're going to keep continuing running out the staff they have as is over the second half of the year, and dare I say into September and October, they'd find themselves in a whole lot of trouble. The good news is that's not going to be the case. We'll have to see on Minaya. We'll have to see on Senga. I'm a little bit more optimistic on Senga at this point than I am Sean Minaya with all the negative news coming out of him. But I also think David Stearns is going to be in an interesting position because the Mets as a franchise have kind of looked at their team and they've said, hey, we know how to transform a pitcher. We're going to go buy low on so-and-so. We're going to get the most out of them. We're going to transform them. You got a window to win here with this group. You paid Juan Soto $1 zillion. You have Alonso here. You have Lindor here. They're in the primes of their careers. You kind of find yourself in a, hey, let's go and get this thing type of deal over the next couple of years. Is David Stearns going to maybe change his philosophy and his approach at the deadline? And I don't know who that big pitcher may be. I think that's going to play out over the next few weeks. But that's where I'm very curious, where it's like, hey, guys who I've brought in have done a great job of holding down the fort, but who is the guy maybe that I can go and get that can take this team and kind of propel them to the next level?
I want to just follow up on that. Danny, is there anyone that you have in your mind that you're like, I think they should go get that guy at the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, if we're thinking of one guy, I mean, a lot of people are talking about Sandy Alcantara. It would be Merrill Kelly on the D-backs. They're kind of starting to slip a little bit. The NL West is really competitive. The NL wildcard race overall is really, really competitive. But if I'm the Mets, and like JJ said, knowing what Stearns has done in the past as far as how he operates at the deadline, he doesn't love to part with huge packages for guys. So, Alcantara's under team control for another couple of years. I think Merrill Kelly, somebody who's a free agent after the season, won't cost nearly as much, Mets have a really, really deep and talented farm system. You can probably go ahead and get somebody like that without really having it hurt you too much. He'd be the guy that I keep an eye on.
We saw last year, David Stearns has a way of just making things work some way, somehow. So if it's going to be anyone, I think David Stearns will be able to figure it out at the trade deadline. Also with their farm system, I'm surprised they haven't called more of those guys up with the injuries they have. We'll talk more about the injuries, especially Sean Manaea, coming up in a little bit. But let's talk about the offense. They were really struggling in June. Looks like things are getting a little bit better as July has come. It's a small sample size, but a lot better. JJ, how do you think they've finally broken out of that slump?
Well, it starts with the big four, right? It's the big four plus McNeil. That's kind of how the Mets go offensively speaking. And if you want to look specifically at this Subway Series, I mean, Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil were in the middle of everything. McNeil hit the home run on Friday when you down a run against Luke Weaver. Pimped it, no doubter. Love seeing the fire and the emotion out of Jeff. And Nimmo wrecked the game from Jump Street. And I was there on Saturday. Everybody in the building is like, what in the world is Juan Soto doing, who had as good a month of June as you could possibly have? I don't need Juan Soto trying to bunt for a hit with first and second and nobody out. And it's like, oh, this is how this inning is going to go for the Mets. Thankfully, Brendan Nimmo is like, no, Juan, don't worry. I'm going to bail you out. I'm going to put one over the fence for a grand slam. And that way nobody is talking about your bunt. But, I look at the big three. Soto, never going to be concerned about him. Alonso's hitting for insane power. And I know there's some concern about Lindor and his health and the toe and how he's going to handle the rest of the year. He's such a gamer. I think he'll be fine. He might not be as productive as he was last year. He's going to post. He's going to put up numbers. Those other two guys, though, you really need Nimmo to continue this sort of good streak of baseball he's played at. He went into the tank in the second half of the year last season. They can't have that again. And McNeil was hurt. I love what those two guys can bring to this lineup. So to me, that's what I was looking at over the course of the weekend. More good from Nimmo, more good from McNeil.
Danny, he just said the big three plus McNeil are kind of the way this team has gotten out of the slump. But do you think right now the bottom of the lineup is more important than the top of the lineup? Or do you think the top of the lineup will carry the team further?
I'm not worried about the top of the lineup, and I don't have too much concern about the bottom. I think they just kind of needed to get healthy. Needed to get guys hitting again. I think the bottom just needs to be kind of operational. Help get guys in when they're on, and there's going to be a lot of traffic in front of them. Jesse Winker coming back, and that should be tomorrow night in Baltimore. That should really help. He wasn't having a huge season before he got hurt, but he was solidly above average. His OPS plus. I think another one to keep an eye on is, as we continue here, is Francisco Alvarez. I mean, he was obviously in his own head, kind of lost a little bit. They decided to send him down to AAA and get a reset. And David Stearns said at the time that it wasn't going to be based on stats when he came back up. But he's crushed 4 homers already in AAA. So once he hits those benchmarks, he can be a huge difference maker in the second half for this team.
I think the All-Star break is coming at the perfect time for the Mets. Get everyone a break, get everyone healthy, hopefully come back with all the power in the world. The Mets and the Yankees both needed a lot of wins before the break here in July. The Mets and Yankees split the regular season series, each winning 3 games. JJ, what were your overall thoughts on the Subway Series? Do you think the Juan Soto drama, all the hype around this year's Subway Series lived up to what it was expected?
Yeah, I thought it was a whole lot of fun. I think the Soto storyline was far more played up the last time these teams matched up because remember, it was at Yankee Stadium. It was the first time Yankee fans got a glimpse of Juan Soto in the short porch in right field, in the Bronx, wearing the orange and blue uniform. We now have had basically 2+ months of baseball since May 16, 17, 18. So I think everybody's kind of come to grips with the fact, hey, Soto's a Met. The Mets have kind of gone and done their thing. The Yankees have moved on and they've kind of done their thing. But yeah, like the dynamic of, hey, Juan Soto comes up on Friday. Yankees have a 2-0 lead. Met fans are standing up, giving him a standing ovation, saying, hey, that's our dude. That's our guy, kind of embracing him. And then you had the Yankee fans scattered, still booing the living daylights out of him. Like, get used to it. This will be the narrative and the theme of the Subway Series now. For the next decade plus, it's not going away. But as far as like the intensity of the games, the entertainment value of the games, they're always a ton of fun. I like the 3-3. I hate when they play the 2-2. That bothers me. I like the full slate of games like we got couple in May, couple over a holiday weekend. All in all, Subway Series, yeah, ton of fun.
Danny, what would you rate this Subway Series 1 out of 10?
I'll give it a 7.5. The first part of it in the Bronx wasn't so much fun. I mean, I know there was a lot said about how Soto really kind of bombed out that series. I don't think he bombed out. I mean, he was definitely kind of still in his head a bit. He did reach base a bunch via the walk, but he obviously exploded over the weekend at City. So that was nice to see. It was great to see the offense for the Mets really kind of come around as a whole. I think it was nice to see the Mets kind of get their groove back. The crowds were incredible, and I think unlike the last few seasons, it could kind of skew a little bit more Yankee heavy at City than the Mets presence in the Bronx. I think it was a little bit more filled with Mets fans this year, which is nice. And we got really, a couple of great games. I mean, Saturday was a bit of a blowout for most of it, but Friday was a fantastic game. Yesterday was a great game, despite the Mets kind of maybe waving the flag a little bit with the pitching staff going in, but really, really good series overall.
I actually was just going to talk about that third game with the pitching staff. Kind of felt like the Mets were just giving up the win there. They were saying, we're going to do a bullpen game. They used Diaz and Ryan Stanek up 6 runs the game before. Do you like, Danny, how Carlos Mendoza and the Mets front office managed the series as a whole? I feel like there really wasn't much they could do in that third game with how many people they don't have on the pitching staff.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of just played the hand they're dealt. I understand why they did it. They're playing the long game. Like, they're treating it like any other series in July. So the fans are going to look at it and be kind of irritated. Why are we doing bullpen games on Friday? Why are we doing a bullpen game on Sunday? If I had my way, and I obviously don't, I would have called up either Sproat or McLean to pitch either Friday or Sunday, because they both lined up in a way that the Mets could have done that. But, Stearns explained that he's not a big fan of going to top prospects just to make one start in the majors. And I can see his side of it. I can see the fan side of it. But what they're doing is playing the long game here. And for that, it was the right move.
JJ, do you think they should have called up one of the younger guys, Sproat, McLean, or do you like the fact that they just kept with who they have up already?
So selfishly, I wanted to see one of the top prospects pitch over the weekend. I would have found that to be a lot more entertaining, but if I'm Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns, I'm going to sit back on Monday and I'm going to say, hey, guess what? Numbnuts. It worked out well for us. We won 2 out of 3 with our pitching being totally compromised. I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. We found a way to go and win the series. If there's something I'm going to nitpick from Carlos Mendoza, I mean, what are you doing pitching Aaron Judge there? I mean, my goodness, that was insane. I don't want to hear that Giancarlo Stanton roped the double the at-bat prior. You have an opportunity to set up a double play. Aaron Judge is the best hitter on planet Earth at the moment. You don't give him anything to hit there. I thought that was the major boo-boo for Mendy. He's like me on the first tee at Silver Lake. He wants the mulligan after you shank one into the trees. Mendy, you want the mulligan after pitching Aaron Judge there with a base open.
I love it. I love seeing any pitcher pitch to Aaron Judge. Nothing better for a Yankee fan to see Aaron Judge hit one out. But Mendoza also shook up the lineup by moving Francisco Lindor out of the leadoff spot. Clearly worked. Mets going 4-1 since the move. Danny, do you think that's the lineup the Mets should stick with Francisco Lindor in that spot?
I would stick with it for now. I mean, it's been working, and it's interesting because once he made that change, he was asked in his pre-game availability before that first game. He's like, oh, it's just because of the pitching matchups today. And then he stuck with it. So whether or not he was waiting to see if it worked before confirming that he was going to stick with it or not, it's working. I would definitely keep it going. It'll be interesting to see what they do if Marte has to hit the IL. He had that knee flare-up last night. So we'll see, because he had been hitting second a bit. But again, Winker coming back should help if Marte hits the IL. But I like that Mendoza was proactive with it. Lindor was starting to get into a little bit of a rut, shook things up, came right out of it. Pete was hitting great. Soto obviously had that huge day. Vientos is starting to hit the ball hard, though without much luck. But yeah, I like how Mendoza handled that.
You just mentioned the injury to Starling Marte and Jesse Winker's possible return soon. Tweaked his knee, 9th inning on Sunday against the Yankees. No update on the severity yet, but it looks like they're going to be cautious with Starling Marte. JJ, how should the Mets manage these 2 injuries, Marte and Winker, with the break approaching?
Yeah, listen, it's a bummer with Marte because he's starting to swing a much better bat. I thought he had a very productive Subway Series. he's an older player. You got to tread lightly. Like, I don't think you're going to push him here over the final 6 games going into the break, knowing, hey, you're off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But I think the impact of Jesse Winker is a big deal in Metland because they're dying for answers at that bottom of the order. And Met fans know this well with Winker. He was a pain in the neck when you used to play against him. His days with the Cincinnati Reds, the way he could kind of get under your skin. He had that same impact helping the Mets and getting under the skin of other teams that he was playing. And I think he can go a long way in lengthening out the lineup. He didn't get off to a great start this year, but if he can go and just anchor that 6th spot in the order, that 7th spot in the order, I think it changes the feel and the look of the Met lineup. And as far as how they're shaking out the lineup, to me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You're scoring runs. I'm a believer in hot. I know the analytics don't agree. Guess what? They're wrong on that. I'm right on that. When you're hot, you're hot. And when you got to feel like Mendoza had making the lineup change, you don't want to mess with the karma and the juju and everything that comes with it. What's interesting, though, is against the lefty, now all of a sudden do you move Lindor back in that leadoff spot if Starling Marte is unavailable? My gut would be probably yes.
Yeah, about Jesse Winker hit a home run in his rehab start yesterday with the Syracuse Mets. So promising. Hopefully he could be back and, like you said, add a spark to the Mets lineup. Let's move on to Mets pitching injury updates. Kodai Senga made his first rehab start for the Binghamton Rumble Ponies through 68 pitches, struck out 4, allowed 3 earned runs. Danny, what's a realistic timeline for Senga's return?
It's looking like Friday or Saturday against the Royals in KC, which is perfect timing for the Mets. Their rotation is finally starting to stabilize a little bit here. And it was a little surprising, I think, to everyone. It was even surprising to Mendoza that Senga's making it back before Minaya, before the All-Star break. But the thing with his injury was it was a hamstring, so he could keep throwing the entire time. So his stretching out didn't have to be nearly as long as Minaya's. So he had that one rehab start, looked sharp enough, and he'll be back. And it's a shame that he went down when he did. He was leading the majors in ERA. He was on track to almost certainly make the All-Star game. But getting him back will be a shot in the arm for the Mets. And then Minaya not long after that.
JJ, do you think when Kodai Senga comes back, he can get back to the form he was in the beginning of the season? Because like Danny said, he had under a 2 ERA and was really just very, very hot for the Mets.
I don't know, Niki, if he's going to pitch to a sub-2 ERA the entirety of the season, but do I think that he can play a major role in helping out this rotation? Yes, he's a very talented pitcher who's put up really good numbers at the big league level. Here's the 2 things I'm looking for out of Kodai Senga when he comes back. And it's not going to happen immediately because obviously there's going to be pitch counts and the Mets are going to tread lightly. But I need a little bit more length out of Senga. I think Senga could go deeper into these games. I want to see him, quite frankly, go a little deeper into these games. That's something I'm watching. The other thing that you have to be, I guess, a little bit alarmed with is just his brittle nature. And I know this is a freak injury, covering first base, had a freak injury last year when he got hurt. He was throwing a great game against the Atlanta Braves, but these sort of things continue to keep happening to Kodai Senga. So whether they're freakish or not, it's cause for concern because the Mets need him to go and pitch. There's not as much of a sense of urgency for David Stearns to go and have to go and get a starting pitcher if Kodai Senga is going to come back and he's going to be the guy he was first 2 months of the year. And if Sean Manaea can come back and, dare I say, get close, not to get to where he was last year, get close to where he was last year, you're in a really good spot.
Sean Manaea may also make his long-awaited return before the All-Star break in Kansas City. Danny, what should we expect? Because we know he's probably not going to be as good as he was last season, especially right off the bat.
I would say something between how he looked at the beginning of last season and the end of last season. He dropped his arm angle in the middle of the summer and was just dominating. And that's why he got the contract he did. So obviously the Mets believe in that change. They believe in how it impacted what hitters were seeing from him, how they were producing off him. Manaea is just also a bulldog, so I expect him to really come out there and give them some serious compete. But, the rotation stabilizing in this way is going to give them an interesting decision to make at the deadline. If everybody's healthy, you don't really need to add to it, but it makes sense to add regardless. You've also got Sproat down there. You've got McLean down there. I guess you've got a very tiny chance of Jonah Tong impacting the big league team at some point this season. But For Minaya, for Senga, you just want them to stay healthy. And if they stay healthy heading into the break, heading into the All-Star game, and then further along at the deadline, the Mets are going to be in a really advantageous spot when it comes to the starting rotation.
Yeah, so Danny just said that if everyone's healthy, they won't necessarily need to add starting pitching, but it seems like kind of the smart thing to do with, like you said, JJ, the freak injuries that continue to keep happening for the Mets. Who do you think, if there's one guy you want them to get, who do you want them to go out and get at the deadline, JJ?
Keep an eye on old buddy, old pal, Seth Lugo, Kansas City Royals. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what Kansas City's mentality is going to be at the trade deadline, but Seth Lugo is a gamer. He's a bulldog. He throws 5 or 6 different pitches. And listen, the Mets should have kept him in the starting rotation. That's something he wanted to do going back to his tenure with the Mets. They bounced him back and forth, reliever, starter. So I don't know where Lugo would stand on the dynamic of coming back, if that's something he'd be totally on board with. I think he'd be A-okay with it if he knows he's going to be getting the ball every 5th day. But, you know, a lot of the names from the starting pitching standpoint, Alcantara, everybody's talking about him. The Marlins stink. Arizona, everybody's kind of wait and see. What are they going to do? Are they going to be aggressive? Are they going to add to their team? Are they going to stay kind of status quo? Are they going to sell? But I think Kansas City, where they're at in the American League Central, the division is dead. They can't score runs. Lugo's an older guy. I think that's somebody they look to move. And if he's on the market, I think he makes a lot of sense for the Mets.
Yeah, definitely. And then maybe they can see a glimpse of him this coming series. So like I mentioned, the All-Star game is right around the corner. It seems crazy that the season is already halfway over, but MLB announced its All-Star rosters on Sunday. Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, Edwin Diaz making the team. Juan Soto, despite winning NL Player of the Month in June, was not on that team. Danny, was Soto snubbed from the All-Star game, or is it understanding, or do you understand it despite his hot June?
No, I think it was a massive snub. I would even go far to say it was embarrassing, really. I jotted down some numbers. 904 OPS, 160 OPS plus, which is literally his career average OPS. 72 walks, leads the majors, leads the National League in OBP, 21 homers, 65 runs scored. On pace for a 37 homer, 116 run, 128 walk season. And then I saw this one earlier, hat tip to Between the Numbs on Twitter. One of 7 players in MLB history to have at least 20 homers, 70 walks, 15 doubles, 10 steals before the break. He'd be the only one to not be an all-star. And look, I understand the selection process. You need to have every team represented, and a couple of the outfielders who are on the NL team via the reserves. That's what it is. But Fernando Tatis Jr. Made the team over Soto. His OPS is 104 points lower than Soto. So I don't get it. I understand there's a lot of debate about who the best hitter in baseball is. Is it Judge? Is it Ohtani? Is it Soto? I think Soto is the best pure hitter in baseball. He's having a fantastic season. And I think it's a total joke that he was left off the team. And hopefully there's someone who drops out and he gets his shot, because he deserves to be there.
I think also because your name is Juan Soto, when you're not performing at your absolute very best, everyone just kind of like writes you off. Like, oh, he's not the player he used to be, but his numbers are still insane. JJ, what are your thoughts on this?
So it's interesting. If you would have asked me in early June, I would have been like, yeah, Juan Soto doesn't have the numbers to be an all-star. It would be justifiable. Then he has an insane month of June. So you want to tell me Juan Soto doesn't end up starting the game because of his slow start over the first 2 months of the year? I totally get that. His June did enough to go and put him in the game. Danny illustrated the stats, the OPS, the power. He's stealing bases, which is something he normally would not do. And it was an all-time month of June. It's one of the best months a Met has ever had, period, in the history of the franchise. He should be on the All-Star team. He's got a better case than Fernando Tatis Jr. Now, as far as Soto and whether or not he ends up there, I think that probably depends on Juan Soto. Somebody's going to drop out. He's probably going to be the first name that gets called. Does Juan say to himself, hey, been there, done that. I've been in the All-Star game 10 zillion times in my career. I'm going to go next year. I'm going to go the year after that. I'm hitting Miami. I'm hitting the DR for a couple of days. If I were Juan Soto, I think that would be my mentality. You don't name me the game the first time, the hell with it. I'm enjoying my time off. I'll see you Friday when the Mets resume the action. But that's Juan's decision, not mine. So who am I to say?
Yeah, he's like, I know who I am. I don't want to be anyone's second choice. Don't pick me the first time I'm out here. But definitely we'll wait and see if Soto does head to Atlanta and play in the All-Star game. Let's look ahead after the All-Star game, or right before the All-Star game. The Mets are still a game and a half behind the Phillies. They face the under 500 Orioles and then the Royals before the break, while the Phillies play the Giants and the Padres. Danny, is catching the Phillies before the All-Star break important for the momentum for the Mets entering the second half of the season?
I don't think so. I mean, it would be nice if it happened, but if they just continue to play the way they've been playing, the wins will be there. The Phillies are in a really tough stretch right now, so it'll work itself out. And obviously the division is the goal here, but the Mets are 4 games clear of a playoff spot, so I don't think they're feeling much pressure to catch Philly, at least right now. But you would definitely like to see them carry the momentum from the Brewers series, from the Yankee series, into Baltimore, into KC. And I would expect they will, with the pitching stabilizing, with the offense looking a lot better, getting Winker back, getting Senga back, getting Minaya back. And then we'll see how it shakes out in the second half.
JJ, we saw the Mets lose to the Braves a couple times a few weeks ago. Everyone was like, of course, the Braves are now coming back, but they're actually still struggling. They're now behind the Marlins in the NL East standings. Do you see them as sellers at the trade deadline? Because it looks like they're kind of running out of time for some sort of playoff comeback.
I think we're heading in that direction, Nikki. And it's crazy to say because when they swept the Mets a couple weekends ago down in Atlanta, I was like, okay, not only are they going to be in the playoff race, are they going to make this a 3-team race within the NL East? Are they going to get right there with the Phillies and the Mets? And the answer to that question is a resounding no. Now, do I see Atlanta taking a guy like Ronald Acuna and putting him on the market? No, probably not. But do I think they can be a minor seller? Yeah, because it's just one of those years that from Jump Street has been off from an Atlanta standpoint. I mean, look at the way they started the year. They've not been able to dig themselves out of that hole. They've dealt with a whole lot of adversity and setbacks and underperformance galore. It's a 2-team race in the National League East. It's the Mets, it's the Phillies. And as long as you stay within striking distance going into the month of September and your team is playing good ball, that's all you need to be concerned about. Like the idea of like at the All-Star break, do I need to be in first place? No, it means very, very little. And just making sure you're in the dance is the most important thing you could do with this playoff format being the way that it is. We've seen a lot of division winners. The Phillies are a perfect example last year. They won their division. The Mets had to get into the playoffs on the final day of the year, basically. And we know what happened in the division series. You get hot at the right time. That to me is far more imperative now than winning your division.
I also think seeing the Mets kind of turn things around in July makes everyone feel a little bit more comfortable. Like, okay, they had a little bit of a bad streak, but things are looking up, which is a good feeling to have going into the All-Star break. So finally, before we go, I'm going to ask both of you to name one player who needs to have a big week going into the break. Danny, I'll start with you.
Mark Vientos, easily here. He hit the ball hard a lot on Saturday. Not much luck on the balls in play. But for the Mets to really get to where they want to go ultimately, and for the offense to really kind of hit its stride, they need Vientos not to be the guy he was last year. Doesn't need to hit 30 homers. Doesn't need to be a total menace. But they need him to excel. He hasn't done that yet. He was doing okay before the injury. Hasn't really been there since he came back. But Mark Vientos is my guy to have a big week.
JJ?
Good choice, Danny. I'm going to go with Tyrone Taylor. To me, Tyrone Taylor is in a position now over the next 2 or 3 weeks. He's auditioning to keep his job. That's basically it. Because the Mets, if they're going to go and add an offensive player at the deadline, center field reeks of an obvious place to go and upgrade. I still think they should be in the position where they do it anyway. But if you're Tyrone Taylor, and I know his defense is sparkling, and I know he played really well last year, his OPS stinks. He has not given the Mets a whole lot at any point offensively this year. It would behoove you to go and have a good stretch going into the All-Star break and then coming out of the All-Star break to at least kind of maintain your position as a platoon guy when the Mets make a deal.
I'm going to say the bottom half of the lineup. I think I need to see a little bit more production from those guys when the top and bottom are working together. The Mets are definitely a hard team to beat. But JJ and Danny, that's all the time we have here on Mets Off Day Live. The Mets open up a series against Baltimore tomorrow in Baltimore. Clay Holmes on the mound. Thanks so much for joining us. For Danny, John, and Nikki, we will see you back here next time.